We've all had that feeling at some point in our lives where we know that something about a situation is just plain wrong. This happened when I was a teenager out in town. No big deal, it wasn't dark, and I've always been fairly used to traveling alone. On that particular day I was a little jittery due to the fact that I was supposed to meet my parents at a certain location, and they weren't there. I'd been walking for a while, trying to call them, when my phone died. At that time I was also suffering from some anxiety and panic attacks. Still not a problem, as like I said, it wasn't dark, and this was a busy town center in a safe area. I was okay. Figuring that an ice cream would calm me down, teenage logic, I went and got one from the local van. The guy who runs it is lovely. Walking through the town, enjoying the ice cream, I became aware of someone behind me. That feeling of hairs standing up on the back of your neck is a very real thing. Trying to look behind me as subtly as possible, I saw a man in a hoodie staring directly at me. Being me, I tried to convince myself that he wasn't doing anything and that it was just me being my silly self. But as it became increasingly obvious that he was going everywhere I went, I started not to believe myself anymore. Still eating my ice cream, I stopped to cross a road, thoroughly uncomfortable at this point. It felt like I should keep moving, to try and get away from this dude. The town was quieter now that I was away from the central area. It was at this point that he got way too close. I remember freezing completely as he leaned down, I'm really quite short, to place his mouth next to my ear from behind me, whispering in the creepiest voice imaginable, "You're really enjoying that, aren't you?" This would have been a perfectly okay sentence if I couldn't feel his breath on my cheek, if he wasn't looking suggestively at the white substance, melted ice cream, on my mouth as I ate it, if he wasn't so close that I could smell the sewage on him. All I know is that he vanished after that, leaving me to run to a corner in the town and have a panic attack. I felt so dirty. He hadn't touched me or violated me in any way, apart from blatantly shitting on the concept of personal space, but the way he spoke to me from behind and the fact that he followed me was just way too much. And oh, the smell. It was disgusting. Sewage was the most accurate comparison. Everything about him was foul. His hair was dirty. His hoodie full of moth holes, his breath like Satan's farts. All I can really recall after that was hightailing it home, desperately trying to contact my parents, all the while looking behind me to see if he was still there. Now, a considerable amount of time and growing up later, I realized that he was probably struggling with some mental condition and not genuinely meaning any harm. All the same, strange, smelly man that followed my teenage self. Let's not meet.
For context, I'm an early 20s Australian female. So, I've been working at nights in a legal city brothel for a few months now. Although the majority of the clients are lovely, respectful gentlemen, I have come into contact with maybe 2 or 3 bad eggs. I first met Jerry when he came in wanting an introduction, about a month ago, from all the girls. It was my turn, so I went in and introduced myself, told him my services, blah blah, etc. There was just something about him that made my skin crawl, and I did not want to see him. So after the intro, I went in and told the receptionist I'd rather not see him, as is our right, of course. Receptionist came back and told me he really wanted to see me, and he wouldn't hurt me. Which, in of itself, is so unprofessional. I protested some more, but this receptionist was a bitch, and I'm still relatively new, and don't want to step on anyone's toes. So, I just did it anyway. 1 hour with Jerry was possibly the most uncomfortable I'd ever been up to until that point. I could barely understand him. On top of him being foreign, he was also high on ice and talking very quickly. He couldn't get it up and kept almost demanding me to go down on him uncovered, which is a massive no-no if you don't want a $10,000 fine. Plus, ew, no thank you. He also kept asking if he can do his drugs in the room, and that I should do some with him. 1, the brothel I work in is very anti-drugs. 2, I'm not into hard drugs. And 3, if I were, I definitely would not do them with this asshole. There were just so many things in that booking that were red flags, and I hated the receptionist for putting me under pressure to be in that situation. So, fast forward 2 weeks, and we have a new receptionist. Thank God. Well, not exactly new, since apparently she was a receptionist for 7 years in the 90s. But she's amazing. Since my booking with Jerry, he had called up to book me a couple of times, but I told the receptionist never to accept the booking from anyone with that name again. Anyway, one morning, 10 minutes till close, someone named Vincent called up and booked me. I wasn't thrilled being it was so close to the end of my shift, but whatever. Vincent shows up, and guess who it is? Old mate Jerry. The new/old receptionist sent him packing, and when I asked about how she knew who he was, she said, Jerry has been coming up here causing trouble since the 90s. The fuck? Why don't they just ban this dude? End of my shift comes, and I order a cab to the front of my work to take me home. Cab pulls up, I run to the front door to the street to jump in, tell the driver my address, and off we go. I don't know what it was, I just had this fucking awful gut feeling. I kept looking behind me through the back window, and I saw a large silver car that, for some reason, I knew had Jerry behind the wheel. At a set of traffic lights, my heart basically jumped out of my chest when I saw his face staring at me from the silver car beside my taxi. I didn't know what to do. My partner was at home passed out asleep, and he keeps his phone on silent. Fuck. We continue driving along, and Jerry is now behind us. He backed off a bit, so was about 20 meters behind. The cab driver hadn't noticed anything, and I had yet to say anything either, as I kept telling myself I was seeing things. Surely Jerry can't be this crazy. Finally, we pull onto my street, and I thought everything was going to be alright, and then, nope, he's pulling in after us. Finally, I was going to say something. We're being followed. Shit, miss, what do you want me to do? Please go back out and drive around for a while. So the driver turns into this car park bit on the side of my street. Jerry can't see us in there, so I slide down in the back seat and don't look up as we do a U-turn and drive past him. He must have thought I gotten out of the car park and hidden, because when we got back, he wasn't there anymore. I think the driver paid him and ran to my building. Once home, I texted the work phone and told them everything. However, they haven't brought it up, and I'm too self-conscious to bring it up myself. I know that's dumb, but I just always feel like me bringing up anything serious / semi-serious makes people think I'm crying for attention. Jerry still comes in, and there's only one girl who will intro him. Last week, she stayed with them, and apparently he wouldn't stop bitching about me. Every time he comes in, I run upstairs so he can't see me. He actually terrifies me, and I now have a knife forever stored in my work bag should Jerry try anything again. So Jerry, please stop coming into my work, and let's not meet again. I'm a 29-year-old male from Manchester, England. The events in this story occurred 14 years ago, when I was 15 years of age. So, I'll try to remember this in as much detail as I can, all these years later. I was in Manchester Victoria train station, waiting to catch a train to Liverpool, where I'm originally from. I moved to Manchester at age 2, a lucky escape from a lifetime of scousehood. My train wasn't for another 20 to 30 minutes or so I decided to go and stand outside the station for a cigarette. I wasn't legal to smoke back then, but not far off, and had looked around 18 to other people. So I never really thought anything of smoking in busy public places like that, and have always been a streetwise, rebellious, and a little rough type lad. So I wasn't the kind of underage smoker who'd be cowering out of sight in an alleyway somewhere, scared of getting caught. I'd been standing smoking my cig for around 5 minutes, lost in thought and planning my escapades during my month-long stay at my uncle's house in Liverpool, and had about half done with my smoke when a slightly scruffy, slightly smaller, I'm 5'11", man of around 40 approached me and asked for a light. After handing my lighter back, he settles next to me on the wall outside the station, as he tells me he's pissed off because he can't roll joints, and his girlfriend wouldn't roll for him because they'd argued. I'm a bit taken aback by such forwardness, but not too much, as I was wearing a bandana with weed leaves all over it, and took that as a reason for this man's openness with his drug business, considering this was 2001 and today's relaxed attitudes towards weed were just a dream in the mind of some stoner, so such openness would normally be unusual and very dodgy. Me, being 15 and full of bravado and not enough common sense, I started boasting about how well I could roll a joint, leading to the man asking me to come over to the canal, near enough right next to the station and away from prying eyes, to roll his tin bag up into a few joints for him in exchange for £5. I'm not and never was a stupid person, and this already seemed a little off to me, as I knew the Manchester Canal to be notorious for gay activity and street robbery. But, as stated before, I was 15, lacking in fear, and seeing that this guy was smaller than me, I decided he'd come off worse if he tried to fuck or harm me. So we went to the canal, him handing me the $5 as soon as I agreed. He passed me his weed and papers, and we sat on a bench as I got to work, him making small talk and me doing my best to answer while concentrating on the spliff building. I remember I really wasn't fully registering his words, and was replying with generic yas and such, until he asked me if I was a virgin. This made me pay a bit more attention, as coupled with the location and its reputation, this put me on edge and I tensed up a little bit, although I answered his question with a quick "Nah, I've got a bird, mate." At this point, I'm only halfway through rolling the first joint, and the man begins to act paranoid as fuck. If I could try to explain where we were for a second, we were in an area off to the side of the canal, with a train station back up a ramp behind us, a bridge leading from one street to another via crossing the canal about 100 yards down it to the left, and a tunnel underneath the railway line about 150 yards down the path to the right. The man starts saying he's worried about the police coming, as someone just walked over the bridge and saw me skinning up, according to him, and he suggests we walk down the right-hand path under the tunnel, where we be out of sight of the bridge. Again, overconfident and telling the man I want one of the joints if I miss my train, I agree, and we gather the stuff together and move off toward the bridge once I've done the first joint, which he tells me to light and go first on, which I do. As we walked, he said something else to me, and it brought home the reality of my situation, and made me seethe with anger, feeling a mixture of disbelief and insult that he'd even think me worthy of trying it with. Him: "Have you ever sucked cock before?" Me: "You fucking what, pal?" Him: "It's good, you know. Receiving feels even better. Ever had a man suck you off?" At this point, I'm stunned, speechless, and struggling to hold back a rising tide of anger. I have always had an issue with taking people's disrespect, and lying to me in order to put me in a position with ulterior motives is high disrespect in my opinion. I have stopped walking now, as has he, and am seriously debating whether or not to try to take this man's jaw off his face, when I decide better of it. Thinking back to the person on the bridge the man claimed to have seen earlier, and thinking that there might be a police headed over this way shortly, I throw the joint in the water and the weed and the things at the man's feet, with an angry exclamation of "fucking prick." I don't think he expected such a strong, confident reaction from such a young lad, because now he seemed stunned to silence and didn't react to his weed being thrown about, or me walking off back up to the path toward the station, telling him to fuck off and I'd break his neck if he came anywhere near me again. He just stared after me, looking vacantly until I lost sight of him. I felt like I won this situation at the time. I got 5 pounds, stoned, and backed down a man more than twice my age, so I felt pretty good about how it turned out. Then, about 3 years ago, a man went missing after a Stone Roses concert in Hitton Park, Manchester, a couple miles from the canal. His body was pulled out of the canal a short time after, in the wake of a massive national media attention. He had somehow got separated from his friends and inexplicably ended up halfway across the city and in the canal. His case highlighted many dozens of similar deaths, always of young men, who have went missing in Manchester over the last 20 years or so, only to be pulled out of the canal, dead, and in some cases, with signs of foul play present. There is quite a lot of controversy around these deaths, as the people of Manchester feel that they may have a serial killer on the loose, putting all these young, fit men in the canal, and up until recently, the police refused to look into the deaths properly, assuming them all, absurdly, to be drunken accidents by young men attempting to piss in the canal while inebriated and falling in and drowning. I don't know what the truth is, but it's a fascinating subject and can be found online when searched for Manchester Canal Killer or something similar. One thing I do know, though, is whether you're just a lonely guy with a taste for teenage boys, or the reason so many young men have been pulled dead from the Manchester Canal. Let's not meet. Thanks for listening to another True Scary Stories from Reddit. If you liked, don't forget to subscribe for even more dark stories. I apologize for the audio of this story being sometimes shaky. I live in a house with a lot of other people, so sometimes I can't always get the quiet needed to record these videos. I do promise you that the next video, the audio will be much better. But until then, everybody, stay safe.